Snowden's revelations about the NSA has seen US intelligence bosses go to great lengths to justify their activities. Officially, they've been told to use 9/11 as their main argument, according to a document leaked in the media, and some politicians are happy to follow that advice.
What I want to tell you about is how did we get here? 9/11. Prior to 9/11, we had no way of connecting those dots.
What Section 215 does is allow the government to connect the dots. These dots should have and likely could have been connected to prevent 9/11.
Many of these reform proposals run the risk of recreating the type of cumbersome, over-lawyered FISA regime that proved so inadequate in the wake of 9/11.
One incident was called 9/11. That should never happen again.
Let's discuss Washington's approach now with Pepe Escobar. He's an Asia Times correspondent, joins me live now from our London offices. Pepe, 12 years on now after those 9/11 attacks, it is fair to justify the fact that mass surveillance does continue. It's a good excuse, isn't it?
It's the gift that keeps on giving, in fact. And by the way, do you remember the famous August 6, 2001 memo that Condoleezza Rice read and said, oh, there's nothing here. So she did not connect the dots, and the NSA at the time did not connect the dots, but German intelligence, Egyptian intelligence, Russian intelligence, they were connecting the dots and saying, look, there's going to be something really big happening in the US soon. And less than a month, 1 month later, in fact, it happened. And nowadays we have this electronic neo-feudalism, in fact, inbuilt in the George Orwellian panopticon complex, where the piece of resistance is always 9/11, justifying spying on virtually every citizen in the world, from sub-Saharan Africa to Western China. This is completely absurd because they are not foiling any plots because of electronic surveillance. And the kind of electronic surveillance that they do, for instance, in AFPAC, especially in Pakistan, they triangulate cell phone calls and they cannot bust anything. And everybody that is caught in between in these cell phone calls, they have a Hellfire missile over their heads. And with enormous collateral damage, it's being proved report after report. So, the guys that they should be running against or running with or trying to trample over, they are still over there.
What do you make of the latest reports that even the Vatican has been monitored by the NSA? Have you heard about that? Even that suggesting that the conclave to choose the Pope was listened in on. Why would they be doing that?
Exactly, and it's absolutely. What's the point of monitoring the private mobile phones of Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff and German Chancellor Angela Merkel, for that matter? The degree of response inside the U.S. is also fascinating. If it's somebody from Muslim countries, the global south, developing world, they don't care. The case of Angela Merkel is very specific. She's like one of ours, like, a member of the Masters of the Universe attached to Washington. So now there's I would say a minimum of so-called debate in Washington, D.C. about, maybe the NSA overstepped their bounds. On top of it, we cannot believe on anything General Keith Alexander, chief of NSA, says. He is an Orwellian functionary, defending imperialistic methodology, in fact. It's beyond surrealism because it doesn't make sense. If you don't have ground intel, you cannot fight what was called the war on terror, and the Obama administration started to call overseas contingency operations, OCO. You cannot do OCO without boots on the ground in terms of intel.
Okay, just very briefly.
If you watch Homeland, the American series, you know that.
Okay, sure. But just briefly, Pepe, much of this has been centered, of course, on Europe, but you're Asia Times correspondent there, based in London. Of course, Asia hasn't been missed out on all of this because apparently Australian embassies were being used to intercept calls on behalf of the NSA. So not just Asia, but also the fact that embassies being used. Does that mean that countries should be very wary of what embassies are doing within their own countries and in the worldwide network?
Oh, yes, absolutely. With respect to the big five, the Anglo-speaking world, let's put it this way. In Southeast Asia, a lot of diplomats for a few years now, they had they were suspicious that the Americans and perhaps the Australians were up to no good in terms of monitoring information. Now they have proof. In China, this is a huge scandal. Ever since Snowden was in Hong Kong, and then when the first batch of information, it's very important that he released, involved spying on Chinese universities, Chinese companies, Hong Kong companies, you name it. So in China, this is followed on an everyday basis meticulously. And China is also speaking for a lot of the developing world all across Asia, Central Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, you name it as well. And this is not going to stop. And James Clapper, Keith Alexander, they already said many times, it's going to go on just like before, and they will always come back to the gift that keeps on giving, 9/11. Unless we're going to have perhaps another 9/11, provoked by Saudi Arabians, by the way. So why not the NSA doing the connection between intercepting communications in Saudi Arabia, Saudi Wahhabi preachers, and the fact that Al-Qaeda is, which way you look at it, it could be dubbed as a branch of Saudi intelligence as well, and directly involved in 9/11. Are they making these connections? Forget it.
Pepe Escobar, live in London, Asia Times correspondent. Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts here on RT.